Pittsburgh's a different version. When you say liquid diet, we're thinking of something a little different.
Yeah, yeah.
I think we're live.
Outstanding. Well, good afternoon, everybody. While we wait for everybody to join us, we're expecting many. It is 4 o'clock, so we're going to get started. I'd like to introduce first our panelists, and then I'll introduce the National Volunteer Fire Council. And then we'll outline what today's event and how it will unfold. I'll start with, my name is Eric Bernard, and I'm one of the National Volunteer Fire Council directors from the state of Maryland. I'm also the executive director for the Montgomery County Volunteer Fire and Rescue Association. And we represent over 2,800 professional volunteer women and men that volunteer in 19 local fire departments in Montgomery County, Maryland. And we are an outskirts of Washington, D.C. And today, I'm honored to be joined by Joe Maruca, who is also on the National Volunteer Fire Council Board of Directors from the state of Massachusetts. And he is also the chief of the West Barnstable Fire Department in the great state of Massachusetts. Also joining us today is Tiger Schmittendorf. Tiger is the vice president of strategic recruitment and retention services at First Arriving. And that also happens to be our sponsor of today's discussion. And Tiger is also the chief of the Brandon Fletcher correction. He's going to be in the discussions. And with us, we have Chief Brandon Fletcher of the Gilt Edge Volunteer Fire Department in Tennessee. And he's also an Army veteran. We are part of the National Volunteer Fire Council. And what we'd like to talk about is, just before we start, is what is the NVFC? It is a nonprofit organization, and we represent the interests of the volunteer, fire rescue, and EMS services throughout the United States. The mission is to provide a unified voice for volunteers in fire and EMS organizations. What do? They provide outstanding resources, training, and advocacy, as well as this program and other programs to help your departments recruit, retain volunteers. You can learn more about the National Volunteer Fire Council and what they do for us as volunteers at their website, which is www.nvfc.org. And look, if you're not a member, I want to encourage you to join. It's inexpensive. It's $18 a year, and it comes with many benefits for you, the individual volunteer, which includes an accident, death, and dismemberment policy. All the training is free that we provide. We have it on our virtual classroom. And you have access to the Volunteer Voices, which is a member community discussion, and much, much more. So if you're interested in joining, please go to our website, www.nvfc.org/join. There's one other campaign that the NVFC does for us, and that is the Make Me a Firefighter. This is a recruitment campaign nationwide that connects fire departments with prospective members. This campaign is federally funded through a SAFER grant, and it will provide your department all the materials that you need to recruit and retain new members. It includes an online searchable database. You can create all the information you need, customized to your department for free. It helps you plan recruitment events and much, much more. This campaign is absolutely free to you and free to any volunteer who is a prospective volunteer who's wanting to join a department. You can find this at portal.nvfc.org. Now, all these addresses and information will be part of this discussion. At the end, we will include links to it. If specifically for NVFC's Make Me a Firefighter campaign, we do have its own website, www.makemeafirefighter.org. And what you can do is type in your zip code, and it will show you what departments are already registered. And if your department is not, you need to register with us. And lastly, I'd like to recognize again the sponsor. I mentioned First Arriving, who Chief Schmittendorf also works for. First Arriving is the sponsor today. I want to thank Tiger. I want to thank First Arriving for helping us to facilitate this very important discussion today. What is our purpose here, and why do we get so many people to come to these events? Because it's about recruitment, and recruitment is a struggle day in and day out for volunteer fire departments. However, you add the crisis that we are in today, this worldwide pandemic, it has only added significant challenges to our normal headache of recruitment. Now, let's note that the National Volunteer Week throughout the United States, that it is coming up in April, and many volunteer departments, fire rescue and EMS, use this time to engage with their communities to help them help you recruit new members. However, because of the COVID-19 considerations, it is making this event in the traditional way we recruit very, very difficult. So you may need to help. You may need some help to be more creative and to change the way you're going to take advantage of this annual event, while you will still need to prioritize community health, member health, and welfare. So we want to discuss what departments can be doing to bolster your recruitment efforts and moving forward during this pandemic. In addition to these topics, we also want to answer questions that you, the audience, might have. If you do have questions, please write them in the comments section below, and we'll do our best to get to as many of those questions as we can and as we have time for. So let's get started on the questions. As I mentioned previously, most of the volunteer departments are looking to step up their recruiting. And how do we combine that with National Volunteer Week in April, along with all the COVID-19 related restrictions that are in place around most of the country? You all are going to be tasked to be more creative this year in reaching these potential volunteers. Now, this may mean working with the media more so than you have in the past, or holding open houses virtually, which maybe you did last year. Maybe you need to host some live social media chats, kind of like what we're doing here. So we need to know and discuss what are some of the ways that you and your departments can interact with the community and let the public know the absolute need today for more volunteer firefighters, EMTs, medics, administrative, while we commit to ensuring the safety of your members and of the public. So these are some of the general questions that I'm going to ask each one of our panelists to talk about. And we'll take turns going around. I will encourage the panelists to chime in if you have an idea or thought that ties in with other one of the panelists that as they're answering these questions. So let's start with the pandemic. And Joe, let me ask you, we know that your department, Joe, had great success in attracting new recruits. In fact, we learned that you received 40 applications in the past few months. Can you tell us what strategy you're using and what has helped you get 40 new recruits during a pandemic?
I wish there was a magic answer to that. I'm not sure that the pandemic had any bearing on it one way or the other. The pandemic has made everything harder, but I think that's kind of a universal, I'm exhausted, we're all anxious and burned out. But I think it's taken us 15 years of work to get to a point where we had 40 people want to join this fire department this year. We only have 40 volunteers, and we're a combination. We have 5 full-time staff. We run an ALS ambulance, but to have 40 applicants is tremendous, and it's been building. 5-6 years ago, we started to get to a point where we were consistently getting 20 applicants each year, more or less, to the department. But what I would say is that what works for us, not everything that works for us is going to work for everybody else. I think that you've got to really look at your demographics, your geography, what I call your fire service environment. What are your neighbors like? What's going on around you? There are things about me in my community that are very different from everybody else's. And so you have to look at that and build your program around that to some degree. But I get three big strategic pieces. One is leadership. We've built a solid leadership team in our department, and the leadership team is clearly wants more volunteers. We've made it very clear to the world that that's the kind of department we are. This is our direction. Even though we're a combination, volunteers are equals, and it's important to us. The leadership team is also very engaging and very professional in how we approach things. We don't like cliques. We're pro diversity, and I mean diversity in terms of economic diversity, educational diversity, age diversity, geographic. It no longer matters to us whether you live in town or not. What matters to us is can you do the job and can you be here? We've become very outcome oriented rather than hung up on a lot of old rules and procedures that got in the way of life. The second big strategic change for us is our training program. We've found and would tell you that more training builds your department rather than less. I don't believe the rationale that there's too much training and that's why people aren't joining. People are joining us specifically because of our reputation and the quality of our program. Prior to the pandemic, and this is where there is a little change, the average volunteer and career member of this department did 190 hours of training every year. Now, last year, that number dropped to about 145, 150, just because we had a lot of problems. And I don't know what this year is going to look like. We're off to a weak start. We're still having problems. Our town just turned red again, and so we're spiking here. We had 500 COVID cases within a 5-mile circle of this fire station at one point. So we've been in the thick of it. But training is critical. If there's one thing you can do tomorrow to improve your department and attract people to you, it's your training program. And the third big strategic piece was Facebook. Our Facebook communications program has grown, and I can feel the difference in the community and their knowledge about what we need, who we are. And there's no doubt that showing our training programs and highlighting our people and using Facebook has been a tool to build our brand. This is brand management, it's marketing out there in the community. And that's why people are knocking on our door to join us. And departments that are 2 or 3 towns away from here are struggling to get 2 people to join them. And I don't want to knock them, but they're not doing those big strategic pieces. So I think that's been the secret. And it took a long time. This isn't going to happen overnight. It took us 15 years of building up to this point. So I think that's my fast message for you.
Thank you, Chief. And let me apologize. We have 3 chief officers. I'm using their first name. This is a friendly discussion amongst peers. We're not letting rank interfere, but let me please, I use Joe's first name. I've known Joe for many, many years. I've just met Chief Fletcher, but Chief, what about you in Tennessee? So this is great. We have representation from all over the country. We have members all over the country, and we have volunteers wanting to volunteer, prospective members from all over the country. Chief, in Tennessee, what did you see related to COVID? Did it help you, hurt you in recruiting? Did you see a spike, and how are you dealing with it?
For us, with regard to recruiting, I don't think we really saw a whole lot of difference. When COVID hit, my biggest concern was trying to maintain some sense of normalcy amongst my team, because we were all a little unsure of how things were going to go. And my biggest fear was, are my guys and gals going to quit making medical calls? Are we going to have a hard time responding to anything besides fires? And actually, that didn't happen at all. They stepped up. We've been 100% now for making calls, which for us, we're a respond from home rural department. So there's not a 24-hour staffing at our station. We're a bedroom community. So most everybody, works some distance away from our small rural community. But we've managed to keep people active and engaged throughout the entire COVID-19 pandemic. And the guys and gals have just been stepping it up every single day. I mean, in all honesty, if I had to complain about something, it's, we've been building a special operations program within the department, starting probably early last year, January or so. And honestly, my biggest complaint is that's been delayed because some of the resources available to us to train, such as your Center for Domestic Preparedness, some of your FEMA institutions and whatnot shut down, National Fire Academy shut down, so on and so forth. But as far as, I guess being rural and isolated, kind of puts us in a little different situation than everyone else. And so kind of echoing, what Joe said, matter of fact, if I could just use all of Joe's answers and just change it to my department, we would pretty much describe what we've got going on in Gilt Edge right now. But, we try to still let the public know. We try to communicate through Facebook, through our local media. Hey, we're still here. We're still in business. We're still making calls. We did several public service announcements, kind of showed, we actually took pictures of our guys dressed up in the COVID-19 PPE. So it wouldn't come as a shock to members of the public when we show up at your front door looking a little different than what we may have looked like in the past. And so just trying to communicate with the public and let them know, hey, we're still here. You call 911, we're still coming. And then backing that up with our dedicated personnel that, that's what they did. They kept answering the call every single time. So a little different situation for us, but it's definitely affected us. It's changed the way we do business, but not to the extent that it has in some of the larger, more concentrated urban and suburban areas.
Clear. Thank you, Chief. Chief Schmittendorf, you also have been a chief officer for a long time. You travel the circuit throughout the country discussing recruitment and retention. Tell me, what have you experienced, and tying in your work on at First Arriving, how has this pandemic affected your experiences with recruitment?
Well, it's affected everybody differently. There are some departments that I've seen that have just gone into recruitment and retention isolation and quarantined themselves. Some were forced into that, where they literally physically could not let people into their station for even a station tour or an interview or, onboarding process, things of that nature. So for a lot of people, it really put their entire process on hold. That trickled down from there to stymieing the training opportunities that were then available to people that they had just onboarded or previously onboarded, who the next logical step for that is that they get their firefighter 1 training or go on to some type of a fire academy or school. So it's impacted folks in a lot of different ways. My experience has been is those who have found new and creative ways to stay connected both with their community and most importantly with their existing membership, those are the ones who we see coming out the other side of this, who, some of them are sustaining their operations and their operational delivery model, and others are exceeding it. We're working with some departments who, even despite the pandemic, were managing all of the recruitment inquiries that they could handle in a timely manner. Their fire academies were full, and we literally had to turn off their marketing machines. So, and then there's folks in between who have just been kind of, status quo and chugging along and seeing a consistent flow that's manageable, with hopes of ramping up efforts as we start to come out the other side of this. As I look at my own volunteer fire department that I'm, deeply engaged in, we've over the last 3 to 6 months been slowly launching, kind of soft selling a campaign, we've identified, we went through a process that I go through both in training fire departments, but also in working directly with fire departments of mapping out their volunteer life cycle. And that's looking at and identifying and documenting every interaction, every touch point, every piece of process, every document from the moment of inquiry to the moment they get to raise their right hand and commit to serve with us, and the application process in between, through the onboarding process, and then everything beyond that is retention. So it's looking at where can they replicate or create new opportunities for to increase both the quantity and the quality of those touch points, despite the restrictions and the limitations we've had with COVID. So you've seen departments turn to online informational sessions for prospective members. And I have to say the feedback I've gotten from most folks is that the people they're talking to are respectful of and understanding of the limitations or the fact that the process is taking much longer than it would under normal conditions. So doing things like online informational sessions, online interviews via Zoom and other platforms, they're getting creative that way, or just bringing them into the station and maybe not exposing them to the entire group, but a limited set of people that they can interface with, interact with, learn what we want them to know about all the great opportunities and great benefits of being a volunteer fire and EMS provider, and then still managing that workflow and that onboarding process in an environment that not only keeps them safe, but makes them feel secure, right? There's a natural reluctance on both the part of the volunteer and probably even more so on the part of their family to say, wait, you're going to go and do what now in the middle of this, right? That can be very worrisome to existing volunteers, but also to prospective volunteers. So, I think a big part of what of all the great things that we have to sell about volunteering in fire and emergency services is how we take care of our people. We work in a high risk position, whether it's going on a confirmed or suspected COVID case, or it's going into a burning structure or anything in between in rescue that we do. So it's a inherently risky business. It's like any other interaction that you might have with a company. It's not necessarily the customer service they provided the first time, but sometimes it's how they reacted to maybe a misstep or something of that nature, or something that went wrong that really wins you over as a customer. Well, we need to take that same approach in all of our interactions, and what we're sharing with prospective volunteers is, yeah, it's a very risky business. There are inherent dangers, but should something happen, we're not only going to take care of you, we're going to stand by you and we're going to take care of you, but we're going to take care of your family too, right? That's the sisterhood, the brotherhood, the firehood of the fire service. And that's something you can't put a price on. And quite honestly, it's probably one of our most underutilized recruitment tools. One, because it's tough to maybe even describe to people who have never experienced it themselves. But we need to bring them into the fold of our fire service family and help them understand what that truly means. So, my tips for people who find themselves in any level of that situation where they're still hunkered down, they're starting to open up, or they're looking to take it to the next level, is first and foremost, never stop recruiting, right? And that starts with including a recruitment message in everything that you do. As I say often, we need to learn to treat every single imaginable public interaction as a public service, public education, public relations, and a recruitment opportunity. So something as simple as, I'm in Buffalo, New York in the Northeast. It's fish fry season here in Buffalo, right? Every nonprofit organization, every fire company, my own fire company included, Friday night fish fries are big during Lent. We have a captive audience, although we're doing takeout only, of 200 to 300 people every Friday night. As we promote our fish fries online, it tells you you can get beer battered, you can get baked, you can get French fries, so on and so forth. And by the way, if you or anyone is interested in joining the Evans Center Volunteer Fire Company, visit our website. Here's our phone number. Here's the email. So, and then we're also promoting slipping recruitment messages into their takeout bags and containers. So we're proliferating every opportunity to, keep that message alive. And then certainly we've ramped up our online presence on Facebook, on Instagram, and Twitter, and other platforms. I'm a firm believer, and especially this day and age, to connect with your audience, you need to be on all channels all the time, which is no small task. I'm sure Joe will tell you that, or Brandon, or anybody else. It's a full-time job, but when it comes to social media, I say start with having a policy and having a plan. And once you build that plan, delegate responsibilities, typically either by one of two means, either by the platform or channel that you're on, split up that workload, or by the type of content that you're sharing on all the platforms. So maybe Eric is sharing all the recruitment messages across all of our platforms, and Brandon is doing all the fundraising, and Joe is doing all the community engagement stuff. So there's different methods of it. I actually just wrote a blog on this that we'll be releasing soon on this very specific topic of how do we delegate and manage our social media presence.
Wow, Tiger, you gave us a lot there. Thank you. Most appreciative. So you hear Tiger in New York State, upper New York State, around the Buffalo area. You've got Joe in Massachusetts. You got Brandon in Tennessee. You got me in Maryland. You're hearing different perspectives and different ways the pandemic has helped or hurt. So we heard Joe, you got about 40 active volunteers. You got 40 potential new ones. Brandon, what's your department size? How many people do you generally have on your roles? How many are active, and how many are you seeking?
We average about 20 on the department, and that's been historically since 1986 when the department was formed. Around 18, 19, 20 is kind of our number. And it always seems like when we start to grow beyond that, then we start to lose, some of the less active members kind of fall off. And so it kind of keeps us steady at that number. There's been times, going back 7 or 8 years ago where we were as down, as low as 11 or 12. And there's been times where we've had as many as 25. So it just varies, but 20 is the consistent number.
Clear.
And we like that. That's a good number for where we're at. Now, we would love to see some more.
Sure.
I would love to have the problem of, not having enough slots to fill or having to put a cap on how many volunteers we could have, but we haven't reached that point yet. But for our area and, again, rural West Tennessee, Tipton County, we're very successful in recruiting quality over quantity. And I'm a big believer in that. I don't want, just to have folks on the roster. I have a pretty high bar when it comes to, levels of expectations and participation. And so, no department has 100% of its membership active all of the time, but we stay pretty high on the percentage wise as far as if you're on the roster, you're expected to participate and fill a role. Some people may fill multiple roles, but as long as you're bringing something positive and making a positive contribution to the team, then we're going to try to put that square peg in the square hole and the round peg in the round hole, and give people a place to fit in and support the overall team.
Thank you, Chief. And Tiger, up in Evans Center, how many volunteers active do you have?
So we currently have 40 on the roster. That's pretty typical for us. We average between 40 and 50. Our goal is 10 to 15 new volunteers a year, fully anticipating that there's going to be both positive and negative attrition as a result of that, right? And we're focusing in now as to where we specifically in that whole volunteer life cycle, where are we losing people? We know we have some gaps in our onboarding process that we need to pay more attention to them. So, hopefully we're going to increase that conversion rate from inquiries to applicants to contributing members as a result of that.
Clear, Chief. Thank you. So everybody that's listening, here's the first thing to take away from today. There is no magic bullet. There is no one thing you can do. There's no trick to this. There's no going to your membership saying, hey, I listened into this podcast or this discussion on Facebook, and here's the answer. this is what's going to work for us today, tomorrow, next week. This is best related to, it's a relationship. Every relationship takes work. If you're married, thinking to become married, it takes work. It's not easy, but nothing rewarding is easy. So no silver bullet today, and nothing that you're going to hear into the future. It's work. It's a plan. Joe started it off right by telling us leadership. We've learned over the years, NVFC has sponsored a lot of research. We know people leave because of bad leadership. Joe talked about no clicks, right? We don't want clicks. Training. People are fearful of, when you tell a new prospective applicant how many hours it's going to take before they're riding, it may freak them out. What we've learned is no, people want that, especially if you're not charging them for it. And I suspect everybody's academy training programs, there's no charge to your applicants, to your members, right? I see everybody nodding. It's free. And then how do we get our message out? Tiger talked about everything you do is recruiting. When we are on an incident, we assign somebody, usually a junior member or a senior member that's not in active firefighting, but to talk to people and say, hey, yes, you see what's going on. Do you realize they're volunteers working side by side where I'm at? We're a combination system. So at the Rockville Volunteer Fire Department, Rockville, Maryland, we have about 160 active volunteers. They do one night a week from 5 p.m. to 7 a.m. the next day. We work side by side with our career sisters and brothers who take the same training. So we go on an incident, we have someone out there. We have business cards that don't really look like cards, but we hand them out. Always recruiting. So Tiger touched on that. And everybody's talked about social media. Now, some of us maybe are just a little bit older than some of you watching us today. Maybe it's easier for you to get on some of these social media, but if you're calling it the Facebook, you're probably in my generation, just Facebook. And how are you using it? You heard Joe talk about it. You heard Tiger. We hear Chief Fletcher's talking social media. So how are you guys using social media now, more or less because of COVID? Let's start with you, Chief Fletcher.
Yes, sir. I think we've stayed about the same. It kind of ebbs and flows because it's like, as you mentioned before, it is a full-time job, and I am constantly searching for that person to take over that job because it kills me. To keep up with the fire prevention messages, to keep up with the recruitment message, the general public education. I usually, for instance, today, we knew that there was a threat of bad weather. So, first thing in the morning, I'm looking at the National Weather Service out of Memphis to see what they're putting out and then sharing that with our audience to make sure that they're aware. And, periodically throughout the day, same thing. And so, I mean, that ends up eating up more of your time than you realize. And then, promoting, on the recruitment side, whether it's a direct recruitment message, hey, we're looking for volunteers, or indirect recruitment message like, hey, look at this cool stuff we just did at training the other night. Just developing a post to convey the message that you want to convey. If you're doing it right, it should take some time to put that together instead of just throwing pictures up or throwing up, statements that may or may not, I'm not a grammar Nazi, but, may or may not be, worded favorably or may not promote your department in a positive light. So, I reread everything I post multiple times. Occasionally I still will miss something and, somebody will shoot me a message real quick. Hey, Chief, you misspelled a word there, but
Yes.
But we keep pretty steady on our social media presence. Facebook's probably our biggest one. We've tried to get into with Instagram and Twitter, and we just haven't really had a lot of success in our area with that. Again, as y'all have said, and I was glad to hear you say about the magic bullet. There's no magic bullet. Years ago, I sat in one of Tiger's classes in Nebraska, and, not having the experience that I have now, I was looking for that magic bullet. And, I wish that, I had learned sooner rather than later that there is no magic bullet. I took great things away from his class, but then again, there were things that he does that he's able to do because of having such that large population base that totally doesn't work out here when you're covering 4,000 people over 52 square miles. and that's, that's pretty rural for me. But then I've since learned, talking to Steve Hirsch, for instance, he's got 2,500 people in his entire county, so there are places even more rural than where I am. So you have to get creative with it. Facebook has been very successful for us with recruiting and just kind of getting that message out as to what our department does. And we're not going to give up on the other platforms either, but that seems to be our most successful one right now is Facebook.
Clear, Chief. Thank you. And Chief Maruca, tell us what your social media efforts look like and what platforms are you using and what do you find the best for you?
Sure. We only use Facebook. And our approach to this has been, when we started this a dozen years or so ago with Facebook, was that we were only going to use one platform and get really good at it. And then once we were really good at it, we would move to the next, we'd add another platform. And while I think we're really good at Facebook, I don't think we have enough time and expertise to try another platform. We've talked about it, and it because it's as Brandon said, it's huge time. It's every day. I mean, we may not be posting every day, but we're looking, we're taking pictures. My guys joke about it. Sometimes I go to calls and they look at me and goes, the only reason the chief's here is to take pictures. They don't need me to command some of these incidents. My captains are more than capable of handling a 2-car motor vehicle crash out on the highway. They don't need me to show up. I take pictures. And then I have to go through these photos and make sure there's no patients and there's nothing that shouldn't be on Facebook, and get this up and posted, and training pictures on Facebook. And as we approach here in the Northeast or New England in particular, town meeting time, when people are going to be voting on our budget, it's a time when we start to filter in statistical information about the department, how many calls we had, what kind of calls we had, pie charts and graphs and big dollar signs, and why do we need to replace this old fire truck, is the kind of things we're doing on Facebook. We don't do as many, I call them, they're not blunt, we need volunteers, join us. I think it's just by creating what I call our brand image is what attracts people to us versus other departments in the region. And that's a big piece of it. And as Tiger said, we are in other ways constantly asking. I tell people sometimes, God forbid you get stuck in line with me at the bank. Because if I discover you're from my region or around me, I'm going to be saying, come on, hey, have you ever thought about being a firefighter? And you want to make your escape. We put, the NVFC Make Me a Firefighter platform. You can create all of these little flyers and handouts and cards that can be customized to your community and your message. And those are the things that we slip in, the dinner at the spaghetti supper. Those are the things that we might hand out or tack up over the lunch counter at the village store. So it is constant that way. But we have found Facebook has been a great tool for us. But you've got to be on it almost every day to make it really work well.
Clear. So I hear 2 Facebooks. Of course, we are live on Facebook.
Of course.
And it is the largest. So Tiger, you're the social media expert. You are the technology expert, at least in the volunteer circles that I visit. Tell us what your experience is, both professionally with Facebook and social media, and your department up there in New York.
Well, first of all, Eric, expert is a strong word, so I caution you on using that. But I'm an avid fan, if nothing else. And Joe, I have to relate something. You mentioned about being in line, and you're going to give your elevator speech to anybody that'll listen. I can't tell you the number of times. I remember one experience in particular where we were at my daughter's college orientation. What, the one where you pay them a lot of money to go to her orientation, right? So that we can then pay more money for her to go to school there. Yeah. And there were a couple of guys behind us, and I hear this conversation about the fire service, right? And my head's just about to spin when the nails dug into my forearm. And my wife looked at me and said, "No, not here, not right now." Right? So, yeah, it's both a blessing and a curse, right? At times. So I feel your pain there, brother. Like kind of going back to what I said earlier, you need to be on all channels all the time. I'm going to take it in a little different direction for a second. And we're talking about social media, but I want to remind everybody, web is not dead. Right? Having a recruitment-centric, a recruitment-focused website to serve as the clearinghouse for everything that you want the community to know about your operations, whether your mission is recruiting more, or it's fundraising, or it's community engagement, whatever your core message is, or all of your messages, that website still has to be up to date. It has to match your brand and your image. It needs to look and present yourself professionally. But if you do it right, and you mentioned that term earlier, Eric, if you do it right, all of your efforts should drive everything to and through your recruitment-centric website, right? That's what we're talking about here. And there's a lot of benefits, a lot of benefits to that. Social media is great, but those are just sound bites, right? Those are just moment in time interactions with our online community. And also take into effect that despite all of this and all this hype and how it tends to consume our lives, not everybody's on social media, right? So even our offline efforts should drive everything to and through that clearinghouse, which is the consistency and the continuity of our messaging, right? And the other benefit of that is by doing that, you can manage the data, the information, and learn from the analytics of who is coming to your website, where they're from, demographic information about them. So that's critical. That's where it starts. And then social media just branches off of that. And, in my own department, we're on Facebook, we're on Instagram. We are definitely ramping up our efforts. We've got probably 3,000 to 4,000 followers. But, another thing that I tell people frequently, just because you have 3,000 or 4,000 followers, you can't assume that every time you post a message that 3,000 or 4,000 people are seeing that, right? The algorithms of every channel change daily. And that's what, our team at First Arriving, I call them the social media scientists, are trying to crack the code of those algorithms every day and get, our customers' recruitment messages where they want them to go. But and I also say choose your platform based on your audience. If it's a younger set, and I'm interested to know, Joe, a question for you is, you're only on Facebook. Do the demographics of the people you're attracting match up to what are now the older demographic set of what people think Facebook is? Facebook used to be 14 to, everything, right? Or actually earlier, 14 to probably 40. Now it's shifted to 25 plus and maybe even higher than that. But Joe, what are you seeing? Are the two matching up?
No. So it's interesting because our department is almost exclusively people in the 20 to 30 age group.
Okay.
We have very few people left in our organization over the age of 40. And I'm trying to think, we have 40 people that applied this year. I'm going to say most of them were in the younger demographic. We do get some people that are 30 or in their 30s, but mostly mid 20s is where the bulk of this organization is today. That's a whole nother thing that people. I go to these things and I listen to people complain about young people, and I shake my head and I say, without them, I'd be dead.
Right.
I would not have a fire department, and they're smarter than I ever was, and they're capable, and we love it. There's nothing better than having 30, 20-year-olds show up at a fire call or anything that we're doing. It's phenomenal, and they're great. I don't know what all the complaining's about.
We've touched all these areas with
Right.
the different cultures. Tiger, you use the firehood, the brotherhood, the sisterhood. And we've all been to recruiting events and conventions where they talk about the intergenerational mixing at the volunteer firehouse. And
Right.
we had a chief at Rock who 48 years old, sadly passed away a few weeks ago, Chief Scott Emmons. And Chief Emmons would describe to me when we first met 30 years ago that nowhere does a community come together, big or small, like a volunteer firehouse. You bring not just male and female, old and young, you have your live-ins, your live-outs, you've got the fire versus EMS if you're a combination doing both, some that love EMS, some that don't. You got your people from out of state, your college live-ins. So the dynamics that we bring together in a volunteer firehouse and a combination house is just incredible. And the younger generation are clearly more comfortable with technology and grew up with it. So it's kind of like learning a language. When you're young, you have that inherent capability. And I like Tiger, I like your wording there of social media scientists that we have at First Arriving. So that ties us back into web is not dead, where social media and Facebook is important. It isn't necessarily the number one tool or the most important tool is what I'm hearing for recruitment and retention. And that's where the NVFC stepped in with federal help through SAFER and helps us do this through Make Me a Firefighter to give us that web sustenance, to give us that life. So one area that I'd like to tie in here is what Dave Statter calls fire porn. So we don't want to just be putting pictures up online of a burning building, because let's face it, I don't know where you guys are fighting fires at, but most of what we're doing is not going to a burning building. And when you throw that on your website and everybody says, oh, great, it's gonna be like Chicago Fire. I've never watched, but whatever show it is where they're running into the burning building with a rain slicker wide open, a helmet tilted, a breathing SCBA hanging if they have it. I mean, that's not reality. So what are you putting on your pages? What are you watching for? What gets people interested? And I'm seeing some questions too from how do we engage civilians? Well, we will make a civilian a member. If you don't want to be an actual firefighter, EMT, or paramedic, you can see right now, we need people to help us build and maintain our websites, that build and maintain our social presence. Quite frankly, we need tradespeople to help around firehouses. I'm sure you all struggle just like we do in an area of multi-million-dollar homes. Our members need that. So tell us more about your websites. Tell us more about what you're putting on there, what is working during COVID on your website. Let's start with Joe on that one.
Well, you would start with me on that one. This is tough, because I'm not sure we're doing anything special that we haven't been doing right along. And as you were going on and on, I'm thinking, this is great, but we're leaving people with the impression it's all about social media. And while I think it's one of the key strategic points, and now I'm going to go also look at my webpage because I'm certain it's out of date in some areas because, we're all balancing so many things that we're running from one crisis to another in our world that I've let the website slip. And I'll bet if anyone goes to mine right now, you're going to find stuff that doesn't match my messaging on Facebook. And
this is great. This is what we're learning.
This is
right?
important.
This is
what fire chiefs have to do today. I don't fight fires. This is not the job of the fire chief. My community, we experience one working structure fire every 3 years. That's all we're seeing. We do 600 ambulance calls. Out of that is 50 or 60 motor vehicle crashes. If we're going to save somebody's life, rescue somebody, it's on the highway in a motor vehicle crash. That's where we are impacting life saving. If we're going to save a life, it's an overdose. It's a cardiac arrest. I don't want to diminish the fire side of our world because it's important and we have to train heavily for it. And it involves a lot of capital to do it, but it doesn't happen enough. Firefighting is less than 5% of what my department does in any given year. And so if you're just recruiting people who want to be firefighters, you're over pushing it and you're not getting the people in the door to do what you really need done. You know, we have
Right.
volunteers who do truck maintenance.
Yeah.
We have volunteers that help with training. We have some retired career chiefs from other communities. We're in a retirement area. They've retired here and they're looking for something to do. So they come here and they teach for us.
Yes.
You know, they
All
run company
important.
drills. You know, they don't go to calls anymore.
Right.
It's a big thing. But the number one thing, why are people coming? It's all about your reputation. You have got to be the kind of place that people want to be. Otherwise, why would anyone come here, particularly not to get paid? Why would anyone come here and stand, you know, a career member in the Northeast? These guys make over $100,000 a year. Why would you want to come here and spend the night at my fire station next to a guy who's getting paid $100,000 a year, have all the same training that he does, unless you want to be here? We got to get rid of all the things that make people crazy and quit.
Yes. So
This
that's
is
a
it.
whole other podcast.
It is.
time.
Yeah.
But you've seen the
Leadership.
research.
Right.
This is it.
Leadership.
Yeah.
That
This is it.
family. Right.
Yeah.
No hate
Reputation.
for anybody.
Right.
It's tough. It's tough.
Yeah.
We want to concentrate because we're in a pandemic.
Right. Well,
And I heard
I'll give you one. I got one for you. So tonight, as soon as I'm done with this, I'm onboarding a dozen new volunteers, and I'm doing it by Zoom.
Right. I would suspect everybody is, right?
Right.
Is anybody
I'm
bringing
doing
people
2
in?
hours of onboarding material with people by Zoom tonight at
Yep.
6:30. And I'm
Yes.
going to be doing it every week until the middle of April, when I think we'll be able to bring them in for outdoor training in the parking lot. It is
Yep.
miserable.
It is miserable. And then we
It's
have
miserable, but you got to do it. You cannot roll over and die.
So Tiger talked about how some departments literally just shut things down. In my area, Montgomery County, Maryland, we had volunteer fire departments say, we're not bringing anybody in. They said, hey, don't come in the station for a little while because we had that fear factor. But it's just as dangerous going on a car crash. We lose more firefighters dying in the line of duty, getting hit, having medical emergencies. So it's dangerous. We recognize that. But Joe's right. We cannot roll over and die. We will die, however, if we're not bringing new people in. Tiger, you spoke about some of the flux. Some years you're net positive with your gains versus losses, some net negative. Is anybody doing in person right now with brand new applicants? I would imagine everybody's doing what Joe's doing, we're doing. You're bringing in Chief Fletcher, bringing into the station?
Yes, sir. It's actually just about an hour before we started this, I met with a new recruit who had turned his application in, references had checked out, and we sat down and got him signed up for his background check, drug screening, all that good stuff. He's taking care of that over the next 2 days, and the hope is to have him on board this coming Monday night, which is our next scheduled drill, which would have us having onboarded him within 7 days of first
That's
contact.
phenomenal.
That's my goal. Is, you know, it doesn't always work that way. Sometimes it's falls on the applicant, but if they'll meet me halfway within 1 week of sitting down with them that first time, I like to have them on the team and starting that initial training process that we have to do either by state law or by our own internal SOPs.
And that's a whole other topic of when you get somebody, how are you keeping them, the retention, right? If you don't get to some of these to people right away, they're going to go on another opportunity, whether it's a volunteer fire department or another activity. So that's awesome
Absolutely.
to hear, Chief. Tiger, tell me, let's get back to the websites here. Joe, I've got the same thing. I have the same concern. I know that we maintain different websites. We got our generic website, we've got our specific recruiting. And I know when I'm thirsty, whatever your beverage is, you say Coke, right? There's not 1,000 different websites for Coke and taglines. If I Google beverages, but if somebody Googles volunteer fire department in most areas, hundreds and most, if not thousands of websites are going to come in. We don't have an international or national tagline until NVFC came around and said, make me a firefighter, something that we can all key in. So Tiger, get us back on focus here. How are you using your website It's not, web is not dead. That is awesome. And tell us, are you bringing people in to train newbies?
Well, we are. We're back in person for training, for meetings, for interviews, for introductions and onboarding and all of that. So New York, despite everything else going on, is, more people are getting vaccinated. There's a higher comfort level, and certainly we're still masking. We're still maintaining distances and stuff like that. So that part of it is working. But, I think going back to some of the things that Joe brought up, and it's kind of twofold, is he's right. We can't sell just the sizzle. We have to sell the steak, right? The meat and potatoes of truly what it is that we do. So, I'm a firm believer that people are attracted to the BRTs, right? The big red trucks, the lights and sirens and so forth initially. But in the end, and what is going to truly draw them in and keep them there, most importantly, is the people. So in all of your recruitment efforts, show the lights, show the sirens, sound the sirens, show the apparatus, but start and end with your people, who they are, the great work that they do. And most importantly, I think, the greatest barrier to someone volunteering, number one answer on the board is, I don't have the time, right? Demonstrate to them by showcasing and highlighting the great people you already have who have this laundry list of a very, you talk about active lifestyle, we have hyperactive lifestyles. If you looked at the nonprofit organizations and other things I'm involved in, and I'm able to fit volunteering into it, every other member alongside of me, can make those same claims. So, I did a campaign with our county that was titled, a micro campaign titled Define Active. You think you lead an active lifestyle, you don't think you have the time to volunteer, define active. I'll show you active, right? So our recruitment efforts are focused on our people. We're specifically targeting 3 key areas right now. One is EMS. So our theme there, playing off, again, leveraging a national program, EMS Strong. We say Evans Center volunteers are EMS Strong. With you, we can be stronger. Okay, just simple messaging like that. We're doing short burst videos associated with that. Going back to Joe's comment about making sure that the message matches up to actually what they're going to be doing. I did a short form video that started with not every emergency is the stuff that movies are made of, but every call is an opportunity to serve. Right? That's the reality of what they see on TV, what they're seeing in other forms of media and so forth. So it's matching the message to truly what our mission is. And our mission is taking care of people. And that comes in a variety of forms. We're also trying to rebuild our youth program. I'm proud of and brag about the fact that in the last 30 years in our fire company, at least one, and quite often all 3 of our chiefs first started as either junior firefighters or fire explorers, myself included, and I was our department's first ever junior firefighter. And obviously that was just a couple of years ago, right? So every man has a dream, but so we're trying to rebuild that, and we're in a tight spot with that because our last explorer graduated from high school last June and is now a full-fledged contributing member of our organization. So we're starting from scratch again, but obviously the testament of that is the catalyst for us reinvigorating that program. And the other thing that we're proud of is we exceed the national average of our ratio of females to males in our department. We think that's great. We brag about it, and we're going to use that to leverage what we still think is a very untapped market with that. So bringing all that message into your social media, integrating a recruitment message in every message that you use on social media and your website, using your website as the focal point for all those community engagement opportunities. If you go to our fire company's website, we took the approach, other than it includes our Facebook feed, it is just a static website. And the only information you'll see is everything about recruitment, everything about the opportunities we offer, the great people that we have serving, and how you're going to want to join them. So, and then we use our social media again to drive everything to that. We're, at First Arriving, we're pushing our customers to identify and prioritize what is their primary message, and then we build their website entirely based around that. So that gets to the forefront and gets reinforced in everything that, basically you can't get away from it,
So
And the last thing.
Go ahead. Sorry. No,
The last
that's
thing I just want to touch on, and again, it relates to Joe's comments, which I think were very much on point, especially when it comes to websites, but other forms of fire service marketing. We as firefighters very easily fall into the trap and create marketing materials that are quite honestly attractive to who? Other firefighters, right? Bingo, right? Ding, ding, ding. So instead of being attractive to the people who aren't firefighters yet. So, and again, that's something that we're proud of at First Arriving. It's a firefighter-based company, but with 33 employees, many of our employees are not fire service, don't have fire service backgrounds, but they also represent the demographics that we're trying to attract. So we use them as a sounding board and to really build our campaigns for the people who we want to join our efforts.
So let me ask you, Tiger. Joe brought up a good point, and Brandon too, that we don't necessarily have time to do website, Twitter, Facebook, and when you talk social media, I think a lot of people think, well, my website is social media, but it isn't necessarily. They're separate. So I'm hearing you say the focal point is the website. So if I'm unable to maintain a decent website, what should I be concentrating on as a volunteer fire department and a leader? Is what's more important, or are they mutually exclusive or not? What do we do?
Yeah, I think they're equally as important because again, it's sound bites versus consistency and continuity. You can have a relatively static website, and a lot of our customers, recruitment customers, we actually start out by building a single page landing page for them that is solely recruitment focused. It's got the top 3 selling points, you know, all the opportunities that they offer, and the whole purpose of it is to get somebody to fill out an inquiry form to start the conversation. If that's all you had, you can still build, again, driving your social media to and through that website, but at least your core message is there. And the fact that it is static, you know, for the most part, or you integrate some of your other social media feeds in case they go there first and then branch out, whatever direction they get to it, you want to be able to have links for all of those pieces so that they can just simply learn more about all the great work your department's doing.
All right, so I'm not going to put anybody on the spot first, but as we wrap this up, and we are getting a lot of questions, and we're directing a lot of people to the websites that we have available. I'm going to ask each of you for a tip. What is a tip that you can give to your fellow volunteer firefighters, EMT, paramedics here, leadership, when it comes to using social media as specifically a recruitment tool? Because we don't recruit, we're going to wither and die. We've always used the tagline of retain first and then recruit. You put a lot of money into people. So Chief Fletcher, you brought somebody in already, got time invested into this person. So we want to retain. But for us to get out into the public in social media wise, give us a tip, one tip. What's working for you? What if you boil this down to a nutshell? The takeaway, no silver bullet, because it's not going to make any of these other volunteer departments out there become what we're discussing. Give us something. Who wants to go first? Go ahead, Chief Fletcher.
So I'll take first crack at it because I stole it from Tiger in his class that I took. But it actually is what resonated with me the most, and it's the biggest thing that I preach to our folks with regards to our recruitment message is the sinking ship model, and don't let your recruitment message, go, make it look like the organization's going down like the Titanic. And words matter. Want versus need. Volunteers needed, volunteers wanted. Those things matter. And what we found the most success with is actually shaping our message to be more of a challenge, because I'm wanting to attract high performers. I'm not a big fan of mediocrity, and a Nick Saban quote that I love to use. I use it in my classes. Mediocre people don't like high achievers, and high achievers don't like mediocre people. And so you end up with a clash there. Your high achievers leave when you start to reward mediocrity. So if you want to attract high achievers, what's going to interest somebody that's a high achiever? A challenge. Are you ready? Do you have what it takes? That type of message. It's not a cookie cutter message. It's going to matter, where you are, what your demographic is that you're trying to attract, but making it more appealing as a challenge versus, oh my gosh, calls are going to go unanswered and women and children are going to die if somebody doesn't step up and volunteer. Nobody wants to get on board with that. So
Clear, Chief, and good point. Thank you. Who wants to go next? Give us a tidbit. Give us something of how your social media brilliance can help.
I don't know if it's brilliance, but here's a technical tip. Your photos are key. When we're posting on Facebook, we get to see how people react. There's all kinds of analytics back there. And I can tell when I've used a good photo and a bad photo. And photos that show your people and identify them. This is firefighter Curtis, and he's being promoted to engineer today because he just finished training on all 7 fire trucks, and he can run these pumps and do all this equipment. These kinds of posts get a ton of likes and movement, and they outscore what I call the public service messages. And we run the public service messages because I think we have an obligation to, but but don't become the local weather forecaster. We've fallen into this trap of every time it's going to snow anywhere in New England, all of my systems explode with messages from NEMA, FEMA, the National Weather Service. Everybody wants to tell me that it's going to rain tonight. And don't fall into the trap of just reposting that stuff on your on your Facebook page or your web pages. Make it about what your department does, and particularly people. When I put people on there for their achievements, I get a lot of interest from the community, and a lot of people see it, and the post goes to more people. When I show a picture of training and it shows the people actually training, it gets seen. Picture of a fire truck, a picture of a smashed car on the highway it's because it's busy and it's a smashed car on the highway, it gets some interest. But people want to see our people doing things and what we do, and they want to know about us. And so good photographs and interesting information about your people, I think there's my tip for you. Okay, I'll let you close.
That's outstanding, Joe. Outstanding. Thank you. And he has the analytics to show it's working. Tiger, give us some knowledge.
First, I want to thank Brandon for obviously being the only student in any of my classes who actually paid attention. So thanks, buddy. I really appreciate the cheap plugs. And he's actually referring to a blog I wrote a while ago, but it was just all this negative media about the status of the volunteer fire service in the United States. And it caused me to write a blog that basically said, nobody wants to join the Titanic desperate for volunteers fire department. We're going down, jump on board is not an effective recruitment message, right? So, but also to touch off of something that Joe said, I'm a firm believer in focus on the role of the volunteer, not the victim, right? And from a social media policy standpoint of what you share and what you don't share, that's probably the easiest way to keep yourself out of, social media purgatory, right? Or public trust purgatory as well, right? So focus on, if you're going to use them in an incident photo or something of that nature, make sure it's respective of those involved. Always lead in and end with compassion and respect for those who were affected by it, but focus more on the role that your volunteers played in making what was probably a very bad situation just a little better, right? Because like I said earlier, people may be attracted to the lights and the sirens and the VRTs, but at the end of the day, it's the people that they're going to be most attracted to. And a little tidbit to also play off of Joe's great advice is celebrating your people, right? Celebrating when you bring in a new member. So a tactic that probably pre-Facebook we started my fire company is when, let's say, 3 new people came into our fire department this month, we issue a press release. So today we would do that on our website and our social media channels as well. And we identify them a little bit about where they're, what neighborhood they're from, their background, maybe what they do for a living, their family situation. But then we go on to say that these 3 individuals, this is the training that they're going to get for free, and this is a role that they're going to play. But they joined the 12 or 15 other people who joined the Evans Center Volunteer Fire Company in the past 12 months. And we list all 12 or 15 of those people. So if you come into our fire department, you're going to see your name in a post or press release at least once a month for 12 months. What does that do? That's both recruitment and it's retention. It's powering there's power in numbers. And it's leveraging the power of referral, because somebody may look at that and say, one of a couple of things. They're going to say, well, 15 people joined that department in the last month, or in Joe's case, 40 people joined that department in the past year. They are obviously doing something right. And that is, to use Brandon's phrase, a high standards, high values, high performing organization that is going to attract high standards, high value, high performing people, right? It all comes full circle that way. But or they're going to be attracted to either the names or include photos where appropriate, and they're going to associate with either that person's age, something about their demographic, their family situation, what they do for a living, or by name because they know that person. So tying all of those pieces together, that costs absolutely nothing. It costs you absolutely nothing to celebrate your volunteers, and that will go so much further than a plaque or a T-shirt or a hat. Which, and that's another thing and another topic, but make sure you're targeting the right audience with your incentive programs, right? The greatest gift a chief that I worked under ever gave to me was he hand wrote a thank you note to Lori, my wife, thanking her for the sacrifices she made, which led to the contributions I was able to make to our department. And I half joke that single document kept me out of the doghouse for like well over 2 weeks before I did something else to screw it up, right? But we can use social media to do so much more of that and leverage that reach. And when somebody interacts with any one of your posts, go in and you can actually invite them to like your page. That's my closing tidbit, and that just builds your audience from there.
Thank you for tying that all in, Tiger. And we see that the NVFC doesn't have a mediocre standard here. We brought together some absolutely phenomenal panelists. We have a lot of people joining us from across the country. We really appreciate it. We do have to start to wrap this up. I want to thank our panelists, Chief Joe Maruca from up there up in New England, Tiger Schmittendorf from New York, and Brandon Fletcher, Tennessee, and all those that are watching here tonight. I also want to thank our sponsor, First Arriving, to bring us together and let us highlight again the National Volunteer Fire Council's Make Me a Firefighter campaign and the resources available. As Tiger said, it doesn't cost anything. Well, guess what? This doesn't cost you anything. What NVFC is providing in this campaign doesn't cost anything. And if you want to be a member, it's only $18 a year. Let's not forget National Volunteer Week is April 18th through the 24th. So get that on your calendars. Use what you've learned today about social media. Look at your website. Let's start getting that updated. If you have questions that haven't been answered here, of course, our panelists were not able to watch them. We do have NVFC's communication coordinator, Matthew Odom. And you can reach Matthew directly at Matthew with 2 T's at NVFC for National Volunteer Fire Council.org. Everything that we have here, we will include. We are live. It is 17:15 hours on Thursday, March 25th, 2021. And in closing, I want to say that the National Volunteer Fire Council lost a hero. They lost their first executive director, CEO, Heather Schaefer. Heather was only 52 years old, and she dedicated 27 years of her professional career to the National Volunteer Fire Council. Yesterday in Annapolis, Maryland, her peers, her fellow employees, and all those in the fire service from across the world who loved her said goodbye to Heather. We were saddened to lose such a wonderful person, such a young person, such an influential leader in the volunteer fire service. And we want to take a give a collective thank you to NVFC, to Heather Schaefer's family, and say, you will never be forgotten. But more importantly, you will always be remembered from the work that you've done. She set the bar at the height that nobody will get over, but we hope to match it. We will always remember Heather and all the work we do and the foundation that she laid here at the National Volunteer Fire Council and throughout the world when it comes to volunteers. Thank you, Heather. Thank you, NVFC. Thank you those that took time today to join us, and pay attention. There's lots out there, and you got the best of the best today. Have a wonderful weekend. Be safe, wear a mask, follow social distancing that your area requires. And remember, we cannot go away. We must recruit and retain even during a world pandemic. And you heard from experts today that gave you a way to start. It's not the silver bullet. It's not the end all of end alls. It's a lot of work. So here's to supporting you, continuing work. Thank you, Joe, Brandon, Tiger, Matthew, everybody for watching. God bless. Be safe. Good night.